So I spent this night watching a bunch of people trying to do what little they can against a democracy that has fallen more and more into authoritarianism and totalitarianism, and just doing our best to do what we can to push back. Oh, and I also watched Star Wars Andor tonight too. Hello interwebs, I hope you're all doing well because I'm here to review the latest episode of one of my favorite shows this year. I'm just saying it right now. Star Wars Andor, Episode 10, One Way Out. And overall overt politics jokes aside, because tonight has obviously been a anxiety-inducing one for much different reasons here in the United States, if you're following the elections going on right now. But it was at least worthwhile to get to Star Wars Andor, because while this show is certainly not uplifting in specific ways, it is a show that just inspires me and constantly, excites me every single time I watch it. And this episode was by no means any different. I was expecting a lot from this episode, considering it was the build-up of the last two episodes' prison storyline and that final scene that we got with Andy Serkis's Kino in the last episode that we all were just like, yeah, let's fucking go! And I think a lot of us expected this to be kind of like the heist episode, the big payoff. And while this episode wasn't as directly focused as that heist episode was, where the tension was just ratcheting up throughout the entirety of that one, certainly by no means was this a disappointment on that front. I was riveted to my seat throughout the entire buildup of that entire sequence, and the heartbreaking nature of it. And it's both triumphant and bittersweet in, I think, some of the most interesting ways possible, because it shows that even in fascistic systems like this, totalitarian and authoritarian systems, when people fight back, it's always still just small victories, and people die, and just no matter what victories that you have here, it's always going to be by inches, no matter how celebratory and no matter how much work it took, and it's going to cost a lot, both individually and with a ton of other people that pay with their lives as a result. And this episode did not shy away from any of that. And it was difficult to watch, celebratory at times, and bittersweet at the end. So let's talk about all of that, because there's so much. I'm going to save the prison storyline for the end, because that's the one I have the most thoughts about. So let's just talk about some of the other things that went around here. We have a quick little check-in over on, again, Andor's home planet. I forget the name of it, but where Marva is living, and we get to see that Marva is, slipping worse and worse in her health, and we see that both Sintra and someone from the Empire is watching. So just a quick little check-in there, not much, just sort of, making us remind us of that storyline. We also have a check-in with Dedra Miro, and I'm saying her name right. Everyone keeps correcting me. I keep saying Deirdre, and I said Dedra. Damn it. I can't remember. Fuck. I'm bad with names, alright? What do you want from me? Anywho, their plan has essentially kind of worked, in the sense that they have put the ship and placed it so they can sort of draw out Krieger, and now they're sort of well, we have to play the part, we have to go and investigate it, because that's what we as the Empire would do. So they're still trying to draw out this Krieger character, who I believe is Luthen, but maybe not the case from what we see at the end here. But we'll get to that in just a second, because we have a Mon Mothma scene, which was a great quick little scene, and I loved. It's basically between Mon Mothma, her banker friend, and Davo, this guy who's sort of this seemingly has a guy who has a lot of money, but not really legitimate, and certainly is sort of we get the implication that he has sort of less than legitimate means behind him, and certainly not a guy that you want to owe a favor to. And I just love the dance that the three of these characters are kind of having, where Mon Mothma is sort of dancing around exactly what she wants to ask. He's like, this is for charity, and I just need some money to sort of float my boat for a little while. And we all know she's trying to hide her funding the rebellion through Luthen. But then we see that this guy's just sort of I get what you're laying down here. And it's look, I'm willing to do that. That all sounds great. All I want, I don't really want much. I just want to come back here and maybe bring my son and introduce him to your daughter. And Mon Mothma, I love how it's just all on the DL. It's not explicitly stated, but you get exactly what's going on. He wants to marry their kids so that he can get some form of legitimacy in this government, in not just in government, on Coruscant, because he's has a lot of money, he has a lot of influence, but he's not seen as legitimate. And by marrying into her family, he can gain that legitimacy. And Mon Mothma's no, that's my fucking daughter. Gross. No. But that's his price, and she's going to need it in order to survive. If she doesn't take this loan, she might be fucked if the Empire catches her. And so she needs to do this. And I love that she says, like, I'm not even thinking about it. And the guy's like, that's the first untrue thing you've said. They've been dancing around and saying untrue things this entire time. But that he knows, that's like, he's really pushing at her. It's like, oh, we've been dancing around. We've been using half truths here. That's the thing I know that you're absolutely lying about. Like, just the dialogue in this was so good. Speaking of dialogue, though, we learn here in the final sequence that the guy who was under Dedra Miro, see, I got it, has actually been working for Luthen this entire time as an inside man. And he's literally, from what we get from context clues, is that he's literally been, like, working his way up the ranks for years to get to the position he's in, just be able to be in the room and to give information and leak it to Luthen. And he's basically, like, had to give up his entire life to do this. He made a vow that he would take on this mission, but he's become a father, and he wants to get out because he knows it's dangerous. You know, he could die. And also, it probably weighs on his soul to be doing this because he clearly does not like the Empire. And so he's an inside agent and he has to do terrible things in order to keep that cover. And it just weighs on him. And also, again, like I said, dangerous place. And he's trying to get out of it. And he's like, here, look, here's this information, please. It's like, this has got to be enough. And then I'm out. Like, I just want to go. And Luthen, like, I love the dialogue with Luthen because he's like, constantly being like, I'm trying to be your friend, but he's also, like, subtly threatening him too, being like, I constantly think about you. It's like, I heard you're a father, the congratulations. And, like, it's just subtly like, we haven't talked in a year, but, like, I know all about you. I still have power over you, and I could do something about it. It's like, it's a low-key, like, threat, but also, like, it gives him the accountability to be like, look, you're a good guy, and he even calls him a hero. He's, like, playing to his ego. It's like, you're doing this thing, and I love that this guy calls out Luthen and says, like, what are you sacrificing? And Luthen calls out, it's like, I love some of his lines. I wrote some of them down. It's like, I have to use the tools of my enemy. I burn my decency. And he's just like, he does not see himself as a good person because he has to do really fucked up things, as we've seen, to be able to, like, get this job done. He has to sacrifice his soul because he knows it's the only way to stop the Empire. But it weighs on him too because he's like, he knows what the difference between right and wrong. But he has to do what he sees as terrible things to beat the Empire. And you see that weigh on him. And the cost of this on him. And then that is juxtaposed by the final scenes with Andor's stuff, which I'll talk about right now. And I'll sort of come back to this at the end. Because let's just go through the prison storyline here. Because all of that was chef's kiss. I took so many notes here. We start off the scene with the body of the guy who had the stroke at the end of last episode being paraded through. And we see the workers being reminded, like, they're going to die here. The feeling like they don't know, but they know. And this guy's body just having worked himself literally to death, being paraded in front of them is just exemplar of that. And we cut to Andor and Kino arguing back and forth. And Kino's like, yes, he's like, was ready to go at the end of the last episode, but he's like, still like, just not completely over the line. He's still struggling with himself. He doesn't want to die. He's scared. And you understand that. And Andor just tells him, like, look, like, they are scared too. This is our moment. And he makes the great points, like, they killed a whole floor of people. Does that sound like power to you? Like, because that's what fascism is. Fascism is all the aesthetic of power. They try to display power, to hide an inner anxiety. They do that on an individual level. A lot of, like, individual fascists have this, internal anxiety, so they project power to, like, being like, I'm the strong man. And, you know, that's, like, what fascism is as a system, too. It's a projection of power to try to hold on to it, and it has to project more power than it actually has. But it's masking a weakness. It's all about that projection of power, and you can, if you see through it, you can see the weakness there. And Andor does, and he points that out to Kino. And I love when they finally get into their rooms, like, Kino finally turns, is like, yeah, let's do it. And he calls out to his men, he's like, I believe that I am dead until I get out of here. Like, just count it. We're never getting out. We're not counting shifts anymore. Like, we are dead already, and we are going to earn our life. And that's sort of been a mantra you see in a lot of these revolutionary movements that happens. Like, we are already dead, and we are fighting for our lives, to gain our lives back. And that's the way, kind of a mentality you have to have in things like this, because otherwise people won't do it because they know that a lot of them will die in this attempt. So you kind of have to have that mindset of, like, Well, they have nothing to lose at this point, essentially. And the whole sequence where they escape and they get out is just thrilling. Like, Andor just, like, at the last moment, just breaking that hydraulic and getting the water on the floor to just be able to, like, short out the sparks when they set it up, creating the infighting, like, climbing up the stairs. And then the guy on the top is, like, the workers, like, throwing stuff at him because he's shooting their friends. And just the shot where he shoots the one guy and he's lying on the floor and you just see his open eyes and, like, their friends are dead. And it's like, oh, God, it's so... I'm not so often so viscerally, like, aware of just people dying in shows. Like, they're usually cannon fodder. Like a big crowd of people attacking someone. But in Andor, I feel those deaths of characters that I maybe had a line or two, because these people have been so humanized to me in their dehumanization, through how they've been dehumanized. And so when I see people dying in this, I'm like, wow, I actually really feel that, even though they're a one-off character, which speaks so well to how this show's been written. And you just see it, like, trickling down, like the water trickling down, and people below in lower areas being like, oh, what's going on? Something's going on. Like, starting to gain that self-consciousness of what's going on and that they can fight back. And they work their way to the control room. They are managing to, like, get control of the thing. And Kino giving that inspirational speech, and Andor saying it has to come from you because you're the one that they trust. You have that authority here. And just in that moment, Kino makes the stand and says, like, we can do this. And he says, like, that line too. It's like, we can earn ourselves back. Like, we are, I'd rather die fighting them than die doing what they want. It was sort of echoing through this, again, here for the workers' revolution, like, throw down the arms and seize the means of production, my friends, sort of thing. The workers' revolution going on here. So I loved all of that. And then we get to, like, the tragic cost of all of this, because they get outside the prison and they're all jumping in the water, and Kino says he can't swim. And what a sad but ultimately kind of perfect end for his characters. Like, he does all of this and he's not going to escape because he can't swim. He can't get out. And yet, in a way, this was his victory. And it sucks because it's like, yeah, so many people have to die just to win this victory, just to escape this. And at the end, we cut from Luthen's speech at the end there. He says, like, it cost me everything. And you cut to Andor and one other person that escaped. 2 people out of all of those men. And I'm sure there's probably a few more here and there. But of all the people that we saw at the end swimming away, 2 people for all of that. And yet it was the victory, because they fought back against the system and earned their lives back. Even if it was just having agency in getting to choose their deaths. And that's ultimately what systems this sometimes do. These victories are just sometimes having agency in our deaths and being able to fight back and saying, fuck you. And hopefully, like Calzani from the heist, that their pushing back will inspire others if that information gets out. That Andor can tell the story of what happened at this prison. And say, like, we can fight back again. It can spark more resistance, but it caused a lot of death. And it goes back to, like, what Rogue One was kind of about. If you think about that as a movie, all of those characters in that movie die, but they die just to get this information out that Leia can use, that sparks a new hope and moves that on. It's the constant, like, all these people die to just move things forward just a little bit and just poke at that power of the Empire. But it's ultimately, it's always going to come with that cost, whether it be personal, like Luthen, his soul, or your life. And I just think that this episode I think encapsulated all of that by mirroring it with Luthen's speech at the end there. I thought was brilliant. This show is so good. I don't mean to call him out. I want to be very clear, because I called him out in my Lower Decks video too, that I did on my main channel where I did review. But Steve Shives is a friend of mine who I really adore. But he recently did a video on his channel. He's like, I don't really know. Like, the show feels like it's a slow burn. It's a little bit too slow. I don't feel like it's going anywhere. And I'm like, but that's the point of this show. The point of this show is that these characters are passive until the point where they have no other choice. And then they make the choice to fight back. And this is all about Andor as a character being this passive character. He keeps ending, like, he doesn't want to fight the Empire. He just wants to live his life, and he keeps making the choice not to fight the Empire if he doesn't have to. And it's all about getting him to that point where he makes the active choice to be like, you know what? Fuck it. This needs to end. It's all about getting to that choice. That's the point. The point of it is to, like, show you that, like, you could choose to just live in these systems over and over and over and over and over and over again. And, it's understandable. We just want to live our lives. We don't want to have this greater fight. We just want to live. But the way these systems dehumanize us, they force us to have to fight back. And we should. But it sucks that we have to make that choice. And it's understandable to run away from it because you shouldn't have to. You shouldn't have to sacrifice your life for this greater cause. You should just be able to live. And so this whole show is about that. Making that passive choice, making it into an active choice. And sometimes you do it when you have nothing else to lose. But when people do that, they can inspire others, maybe, to keep fighting. And so that's the point of the series. It may seem slow. It may seem like it's not building anywhere, but to me, it so clearly is. It's about making you feel rage. So much rage at the injustice of it all that you're like, fuck it, I want to fight back. And maybe I'm just feeling that in the mood tonight because this is the American election going on right now. And like I said, I do think voting is like harm reduction. This is getting into a whole other rant, so I'll stop it off here. But like, I do think voting is harm reduction. There's much more to do beyond voting, but I'm just like, fuck this system that dehumanizes us. And I'm not saying that America is like as fascistic as the empire is, but you see that, especially as a trans person, I feel that a lot. The dehumanization that is coming and keeps growing, and it's scary. And you want to fight back. So, anywho, sorry to end on such a kind of political, but I hope activizing, I don't even know. I'm tired. It's 1 a.m. Love you all. I love this show. It makes me, it inspires me and angers me in equal measure. Star Wars Andor. Fucking great. What do you think of this show? I'd love to hear your thoughts in the down below, and take care of yourselves. I know a lot of us are probably feeling anxiety tonight, so I will say live long and prosper, my friends.